Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Starlight Glimmer here once again, and I am back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos here. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Mario vs Donkey Kong Remake for the Nintendo Switch. So, last time, we essentially did manage to fully complete not only World 7 Plus, which appears to be Mystic Forest Plus, and in addition to that, same applies with the forms of World 8 Plus, which appears to be in Twilight City. And on top of that, there was also the forms of the true final boss as well, which appears to be Donkey Kong Plus. So, overall, we actually did manage to tackle for those kinds of stages no problem, apart from a couple of death situations in Journey forms of World 7 Plus, which is of course, Mystic Forest Plus. So, anyway, today for this video is about the fact that we're going to be able to continuing playing for the game, because as far as I'm aware, similar to the forms of how it does in the original Game Boy Advance version, is that, as you can tell, the main emphasis on this particular video today is that we're about to jump right into the expert stages. So, yeah, normally on the Game Boy Advance version is that we need to able to go for a grand total of 12 expert stages in the original version of the game, whilst in the remake this time around though, it actually added in 4 brand new levels, which are, you know, relates the forms of 2 new worlds, which is obviously Merry Mini Land, and on top of that, Slippery Summons. So, now as you can see on the top right corner, is that since that we somehow got ourselves a grand total of 120 gold stars so far, so meaning about the fact that we've almost unlocked every single stages in the expert stages menu, except for this last one, because in order to able to actually get to this point, is that we need to able to obtain 128 gold stars, so that way we can able to actually unlock the true final stage in the entire remake. So, now I'm pretty sure about the fact that it does manage to take place in Twilight City, of course. So, anyways, let's get to it with the first expert level. So, now, for those of you probably wondering about the fact that why this video took so long to able to actually get this thing uploaded, well, basically, for whatever reason, my microphone decides to glitch out. Meaning about the fact that it usually decides to able to fade in or fade out. So, I'm guessing it's most notably because the actual USB connection just somehow gone loose. So, yeah, thankfully it's all, fixed and everything, especially noticeable. I'm really hoping that we're not going to come across that issue ever again, ever since in Journey forms of the last time we actually come across that issue was back in Journey forms of our continuation portion of Super Mario Bros. Wonder. I mean, geez, that is kind of feels like the exact same story with the forms of that particular solution. So, anyways though, for those of you probably wondering, yes, today's date of course is the 23rd of March today, in some cases in 2024 today, and yes, you probably already know about the fact that recently, Princess Peach Showtime has recently came out just yesterday for the likes of the Nintendo Switch. And for my first impressions whenever I managed to able to experience that game, even though despite the fact that Maxi has totally forgotten to mention about during the course of in a Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 playthrough, that obviously no matter what though, because recently he did somehow finish up every single stories during the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 recently. So as a result, all he's left now is of course some DLC content. So because of that though, hope you guys will all stay tuned for that point. So anyway, so as you can see, we somehow completed the first expert stage right here. Now, unlike the Game Boy Advance version, is that if you managed able to obtain all 3 of those colored presents, as far as I'm aware, that basically what happens was though is that in the original version of the game, you don't simply get yourselves a star. Whilst in the remake this time around though, since no matter what though, as you can tell, we're about to get even more gold stars, at least if you managed able to fully 100% everything on the forms of those expert stages this time around. So, yeah, that seems pretty dope and everything, especially noticeable because that is the reason why that the final stage is locked out behind. We need to obtain 128 gold stars. So because of that though, well, it doesn't really matter how many gold stars you're about to claim. Like, the maximum you can able to get up to is 136 gold stars, if I was assuming so anyway. So either way, And as you can tell, we now ended up on the second expert stage, and that was actually surprisingly easy though. Especially noticeable, although you have to be fast on this part, because obviously every time whenever you walk onto those sand blocks, obviously the sand blocks will crumble, and as a result you have to wait until where they somehow respawn, or potentially speaking, you really don't want to fall into the spikes, because otherwise if you fell into the spikes, then you have to start all over again, so that might be something. And also, as far as I'm aware, is that unlike the original version of the game, that I will have to admit it though right away, the length of the expert stages is actually surprisingly shorter, what I've noticed on the original version, whilst in the remake this time around is actually a lot longer, clearly because of the amount of levels we are able to actually experience from. So, anyways, here we go on to the expert level 3, where it does manage to take place in Fire Mountain, obviously. So, yeah, hopefully though, we probably... drat. We somehow took another death. Anyway, so, I'm really hoping about the fact that eventually later on in life, we're probably not going to be able to come across into yet another technical issue again. Although thankfully the actual laptop still runs very well, but it's just that with the stupid USB connection, it just goes all over the place. Even with my current microphone that we are still using even to this day, since in 2020, that it still works most of the time, but I will admit though, it's just of the way of the forms of those USB drive connections, they sometimes feels a bit too, well, too loose for my liking. Well, usually relatively speaking, that's as far as we can able to say about the fact that this is the reason why it took so long to able to actually get to this point. Well, I'm sure enough though is about the fact that, well, we've almost pretty much done with this game basically before we move on to the next couple of Let's Plays and beyond. So, we shall see what happens in due time, especially noticeable because no matter what though, I'm still very optimistic about the forms of how the fact that, well, unfortunately though, there's nothing else I can probably talk about this, aside from the fact that there are some, well, small bits of news I would like to point things out. Although, before we get into more details onto this though, here we go on to Expert 4, where we're now going back onto Merry Mini Land. And no matter what though, we have to rely on bob-bombs, just like the forms of how it does on the regular world. So, no matter what though, I always attempt to do this a little bit quicker. Like, for instance, we can able to actually time our bomb tossing things as soon as you're able to get it on the right time. So just in case, no matter what though, you can easily, not only we can able to actually break certain blocks easier, but also about the fact that we can able to do this very easily. Well, mind you about the fact that I'm still trying to aim for every single color presence, but eventually at some point, once we do manage to fully complete it, the expert stages, then obviously if we go on to time attack, yes, apparently though, not only certain main normal worlds does contain the time attack, but also applies with the forms of the plus levels, and also this also counts for the expert stages as well. So no matter what though, this could be the ultimate challenge when it comes to able to tackle for this. So anyway, so let's just go ahead and time this little bomb toss at the right time, and exponentially that pretty much does it for the 4th expert stage. Although no matter what though, we do need to go on to that particular blue warp block right here, so just in case we can able to go through this point, and there we go. Nicely done, right there. And yeah, something's worth noting for is about the fact that I think I've already established that before, is that today's date, of course, is the 23rd of March today, in some cases in 2024 today. And for those of you probably wondering, yes, the next Splatfest is usually now up on live, and as a result, the next team groups they're going to be able to be put up with, which appears to be based off from instruments, like musical instruments, ranging from guitar, drums, and also keyboard. So, as a result, it will last until possibly during at some point on Sunday. So, no matter what though, is about the fact I still really can't really get too much investing for the sake of the forms of Splatfest, I must be honest here. Well, that's just mainly because you noticed about the fact that, like I said before, since in the earliest point of the video, that obviously recently I somehow managed to try out Princess Peach Showtime recently. And for my first impressions, whenever I managed to experience the game when it finally came out, since in yesterday, I'm gonna say, it's actually pretty good. Even though it's not the best so far, I mean, I've noticed from the start though, is that whenever I manage to play the game on handheld mode, that the actual quality looks a bit kind of blurry on the handheld portable play. Although, unlike whenever you're trying to play the game on TV mode, it looks so much more gorgeous, whilst compared to on handheld, that it just goes all like pretty blurry all of a sudden, which I'm not exactly sure how that's the case though. Well, beggars can't be choosers though when it comes to quality and stuff like that, but I'm sure enough I'll still have a good time regardless. So anyways, let's go and get hit right there by those flimps and grab this blue present quickly before I die. And there we go, problem solved. Especially noticeable because it really helps with the forms of the invincibility frames decides to come in, whilst unlike the original version, that basically there was no such thing about the invincibility frames. So, but at least I fully appreciate about that. So we somehow completed level Expert 5, so that pretty much takes place in Spooky House basically. Now let's move on to Expert 6, where basically we're going back into Slippery Summon. And as far as I'm aware, it's gonna be slippery as all heck. So, yeah, we'll hopefully try our best if we're able to do this part. So, also as far as I'm aware, every time whenever you do manage to go into those expert stages in this game, basically though, I love the forms of the actual intro fanfare where it comes to able to actually start the stage for real. Then obviously we get ourselves that familiar this particular jingle in the beginning, because you know it is such a cool fanfare whenever you do manage to able to entering the expert stages, whilst for whatever reason on the regular stages, including the plus levels as well, that basically we didn't seem to able to get that particular fanfare with that particular intro sequences. Well, I suppose beggars can't be choosers. And speaking of which though, unlike the original version of those expert stages, I just realized that the music on certain stages no longer speeds up during the forms of specific stages. So that's actually very amusing though, especially noticeable because I will admit though right away, I'm not a big fan of the forms of how the music can sometimes speed up at one point, because I was really into like listening to the music as normal. Well, I suppose I'm biased, I guess, when it comes to knowing about the forms of the nostalgic soundtrack in mind. Well, that might seems to be the case on my part. So, anyways, let's move on to this dreadful, tedious level, in my opinion, where it comes to the forms of expert stages, is that we're going on to Expert 7. Oh boy, we have to deal with a lot of bob-bombs on this stage, and no matter what though, we have to force to use the bob-bombs to break certain blocks, just in case not only we can able to obtain not only one present, but 3 presents, while we still have to rely on the time limit. So, but that doesn't end off there though, because until later on though, things get a lot more ridiculous, especially noticeable how Time Attack decides to come into play, and believe me, there's gonna be a lot of trial and errors been going on. So, but at least thankfully though, is about the fact that at least, potentially speaking, is about the fact that at least we still got, you know, plentiful of extra lives at this point, so at the very least I should be okay. So anyways though, there's also another thing I want to mention about this as well. Did you guys know about the fact that recently, it's been roughly 20 years ago since not only the original Far Cry game that came out on Windows PC, but also about the forms of Mission Impossible Operation Summer, and on top of that, All-Star Baseball 2005, in addition with the forms of Tom Clancy, Splinter Cell, Pandora Tomorrow, and it recently became 20 years old. And most importantly is that the English version of Sonic Heroes has officially became 20 today, ranging from Windows PC alongside with Xbox and PlayStation 2 and even Nintendo GameCube. So yeah, it's been 20 years since Sonic Heroes did somehow first came out in the English version. So because technically the Japanese version has already technically celebrated its 20th anniversary already, since by the end of 2023. So no matter what though, I feel like it's gonna have the exact same treatment as the forms of Sonic Battle for the Game Boy Advance, because obviously in Sonic Battle did originally came out in 2003 in Japan, whilst until for about a few months later for the beginning portion in 2004 for the English version for Sonic Battle. So that's always that thing. So and obviously while looking back on Sonic Heroes even to this day, I still believe it's actually a pretty underrated game in my opinion, although I will admit though right away, I honestly still prefer the GameCube version of Sonic Heroes just because of smooth frame rate, and also the controls are pretty good for the most part, and I will still say that the PlayStation 2 version still is the worst version of the game, while looking back on it though, especially because not only for its lower frame rate, but it's also about the fact that it does have a lot of collision detection issues, even with a lot of glitches as well. So, still, I would able to actually still recommend the GameCube version of Sonic Heroes, and you can able to skip over the PlayStation 2 version at all costs, even with 20 years later, then obviously a lot of people address that for the fact that the PlayStation 2 version is often considered to be the worst version of the game, because, you know, I've already explained about that familiar, so there's no point for able to repeat that particular sequence again, so anyways though, yeah, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. What would you think about the forms of while looking back on Sonic Heroes? Do you still enjoy it even to this day? Like, which specific version of the game is your favorite? For me personally though, it is still obviously the GameCube version next to the Xbox version, because obviously both the GameCube and the Xbox version runs very well, even though despite the fact that the Xbox version suffers the forms of some very weird sound effects, even with the forms of some sound mixing issues on the Xbox version, whilst compared to the GameCube version, does not come across as that issue. So, at the very least, I fully appreciate about that. So, yeah, I guess that's all I can really say about it. And in addition to that though, is about the fact that what I've noticed for the sake of the forms of the current update, for the sake of the forms of Paris 2024 Olympics so far, is that with the forms of both Russia and Belarus, athletes will not be part of the forms of the opening ceremony for the upcoming Paris 2024 Olympics, which I think that was a reason why, is most notably because the war is still going on. So, relatively speaking though, I suppose that might be a bit of a solution for the sake of how the fact that why those two specific countries are no longer going to take part during the forms of the entire opening ceremony for the Paris 2024 Olympics. So, yeah, I guess that makes it pretty obvious for the sake of time, especially noticeable because obviously I just, well, don't want to talk about the forms of that particular Russia country anymore, just because obviously I just simply do not care for it anymore, so, but I digress. Now, actually, kind of thinking about it though, is about the fact that let me just go in and try to do this, and exponentially we can able to activate, oh, I guess that'll work, okay. That works for me, especially noticeable because thankfully we've got all three of those multicolored presents right there, so we can able to finish the level like so. Anyway, so the next thing I want to mention about is that recently so far, in regards to the forms of the highest grossing films that has ever been reached, for the sake of the forms of the top 5 highest grossing films so far, for 2024, that we somehow managed able to encounter not only 1, but also 5, like I said before. And those films are June Part 2, and on top of that, Kung Fu Panda 4, and in addition to that, Bob Marley One Love, The Beekeeper, and finally, Mean Girls. So, as far as I'm aware, currently so far, that Kung Fu Panda 4 was actually currently on 2nd place at the moment, and so far Kung Fu Panda 4 was now on $176.4 million for its box office. And unlike the forms of how it does it for June Part 2, basically though so far is actually on $494.7 million for the box office earnings. So, pretty impressive though. And in addition to that, for Bob Marley One Love actually got into $169.1 million. And The Beekeeper was actually on $152.3 million. And finally, for Mean Girls was actually currently on $104.4 million for the box office earnings. And I was literally so close able to land on that particular Shy Guy, if only because somehow I didn't judge the distance, so whoops. Oh well, it doesn't really matter though, because obviously no matter what though, we still got a lot of lives, like I said before, so hopefully it won't give me that much trouble, I don't think. So, now as far as I'm aware, as far as what Coco Bandicoot has already mentioned about this ever since in Journey Forms within the Klonoa 2 Lunity's Veil portion of Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series so far, that she did say about the fact that for whatever reason, that recently Kung Fu Panda 4 did receive much lower score than he forms of how it does it for the previous 3 films, at least according to Rotten Tomatoes website. Like, whenever I look back on the forms of not only, the first film, alongside with the second one, and the third one as well, because as far as I'm aware, compared to the first one, usually Kung Fu Panda 1, did still manage able to receive the film as in the best reviewed scored when it comes to the forms of the Kung Fu Panda saga, or the franchise for that part. Like, it still managed able to receive about 87%, whilst compared to Kung Fu Panda 2 receives 81%, and Kung Fu Panda 3 receives 86%, and meanwhile for Kung Fu Panda 4, so far it was actually on 72%, which is a little bit lower compared to the forms of how it does it on the other 3 films, which I'm not exactly sure why that's the case. I'm sure that Coco Bandicoot has already addressed that since in Journey Forms within Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series, basically. So, also, I don't suppose if you noticed about the fact that recently so far, I was a little bit hungry today, because as far as I'm aware, recently Pinkie Pie did somehow once again bring some more desserts, including some chocolate recently, but this time around though, she did manage able to bring some mini eggs today, because obviously no matter what though, until around that time, until 8 days time now, that Easter is almost approaching, so because of that though, it makes sense to able to actually eat some of these mini egg chocolates for today, and especially noticeable because like I said before, Easter is just around the corner, and especially noticeable around that time as well, that obviously, we've only got about approximately for about 5 days to go until Kung Fu Panda 4 in the UK version is going to be launching onto the forms of the big screen. So again, my expectations might be a little bit kept to a minimum, but I'm sure enough though, I'm still pretty much hyped for it, even though despite the forms of some shortcomings, but that again, I'm probably not gonna mention about any spoilers for the time being, because obviously that is the most recent film up to this point. So anyway, here we go on to the next expert level, except now it's on expert 11. So yeah, relatively speaking now we're going back into the Fire Mountain environment, so we can able to try to dodge a lot of those Firebirds, except now they spawn in 2 of these, and of course we can never forget the forms of the Sniffing Guy, which as a result, unlike the original version of the game, that it was supposed to be a Shy Guy that just somehow uses this little flame device or something like that, or a flamethrower, whilst in a remake it's now being replaced by a Sniffer Guy, which obviously just blows out flames. So I guess that makes it pretty obvious for the sake of the forms that little differences anyway. So anyway, so it looks like we're not doing too shabby for the most part. So anyway, so it looks like we've only got about probably 5 levels left. So for instance, the next level we're going to be jump right into is Expert level 12, and it looks like we're going back into Merry Mini Land, except this is entirely based off from the Plus variant, because obviously with, you know what I'm saying, nighttime and all that stuff, so it makes obvious sense. So now also, not to mention though, is about the fact that I've noticed something as well, about the fact no matter what though, is about the fact that until around that time actually, is that I've noticed about the fact that I like what Maxi has already mentioned about this ever since in the last episode, or the last story portion of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. Unfortunately though, the Sonic and Angry Birds crossover event has already been ended, so because of that though, it only lasted for about a week since, you know, with the 14th of March all the way up to the 21st of March, so yeah, it's very unfortunate for those of you guys who ever missed this out, so yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. Oh, and something's worth noting for as well, is that around that time until tomorrow anyway, that Samurai Jack the Shadow of Iku is expected to become 20 years old until tomorrow for the GameCube and PlayStation 2. And once we get towards the end of the specific month, specifically March, that basically Resident Evil Outbreak is going to be 20 years old this year. So yeah, time flies, you know. Especially noticeable with the forms of alongside with the forms of some other games as well. So, but then again, we'll save that particular topic if we get on to those specific corresponding months in between. So, anyways, let's move on to Expert Level 13, where basically we have to rely on the forms of those ghost Shy Guys and turning into blocks, basically. So, I remember in during the forms of this, drat, I messed this up with that specific jump. Oh well, no big deal, because still we got a lot of extra lives to work with, so... But anyway, so... That's as far as I can say about this, I guess, in regards to the forms of this particular topic in mind. Although, apart from the fact that for one noticeable thing, that eventually at some point, for I've realized about the fact that since I did somehow try out Princess Peach Showtime, like I said before, hopefully by that time, once we finish up with the forms of maybe 1 or 2 Let's Plays in particular, maybe there's a chance that we can probably able to do Princess Peach Showtime eventually, even though, mind you, about the fact I'm pretty sure that Maxi is still working on... Oh jeez, that was close. I almost got hit right there, especially noticeable I was trying to desperately want to go after these 3 presents right there. Also, I just realized about the fact that this stage is actually a lot easier than the originals this time around, to me anyway. I don't know about you, because every time whenever I decide to do a handstand double jump, the actual height of that jump height is actually a lot more higher this time around, which I honestly fully appreciate about this particular change, which now makes the entire process a lot easier. Well, it might be still not be that easy though, because there might be a couple of times that I will, essentially gonna get cornered, like this right here. Oh boy, this might take a bit while, especially noticeable because it requires a lot of thinking, although nothing even compares to the forms of how it does it for Expert 14, because, for whatever reason, whenever I first got to the forms of those Expert stages on my own time, even whenever I first played the forms of, not only the original version of the game, but also with the forms of the remake as well. Now, on the Game Boy Advance version, what I've noticed is that in the forms of in the European version, including the Japanese version, what I've noticed is that in order able to actually access to every single expert levels in that particular version on the Game Boy Advance version, that basically you have to go and trying to able to get all 90 gold stars, and once you're able to done with that, you're able to actually access to every single expert stages in that version on the Game Boy Advance version. To be more specifically, the European version, including the Japanese version, for I recall, whilst unlike the North American version does something a little bit more differently, which as a result you still need to aim for 90 stars of course, and in addition to that, you need to complete 10 of those expert stages, because once you accomplish that, not only you can able to unlock the expert level 11, oh, I guess that works, especially noticeable I somehow got hit and I managed to able to clip through those little Shy Guy blocks. So, okay, I guess, not what I had in mind, but I'll take it. So, either way, so it looks like we've only got 3 more stages to go, so yeah, everything else checks out there. So, and of course, there was no way we can able to go and rescue those Mini-Marios anymore, just because, well, we've already saved them, thanks to the actual Donkey Kong boss fight in Journey Forms of the finale. So, alright, here we go, Expert 14. Now, this is the level I somehow stuck on whenever I first got to this point, especially noticeable because it requires a lot of timing involved, and in addition to that though, as be expected, ice physics. So because of that, what you're supposed to do here is that we need to toss the spring right over to the other side, and basically though, you have to time yourselves carefully, so that way you can able to get enough bounce height, so you can able to grab onto this ladder, and once you're done with that, obviously, no matter what though, we can able to, like, presumably speaking though, if we decide able to go after that blue present right there, so that should be good to go. But that doesn't stop there, because I think something tells me we need to able to get that spring all the way to the left, right there, so we can able to use that, so that way we can able to get enough bounce height, so that way we can able to toss the key upwards right onto that specific conveyor belt. And yeah, like I said before, it's about the fact that we have to rely on ice physics most of our time. So, relatively speaking though, whenever I first got to this place, it did took me a couple of tries, mainly due to the forms of not only trying to able to time ourselves correctly, when it comes to not only trying to activate those conveyor belt switches, but also you need to be fast on the ending portion, because if you mess up at least once, you have to start all over again. Whilst thankfully you can able to retry this stage as many times as you want, thankfully, just because like I say this before, that thankfully there's no punishment, or specifically there's no penalties if you manage to select either exit level, or potentially speaking of just trying to retry the stage entirely. So that's always pretty swell. So, and I don't suppose that's gonna be correct if I was assuming so anyway, because sometimes though it does require us a lot of memorization, but the reason why I have to do this part anyway, just to grab that blue present from up there. So at least hopefully we can able to try to succeed this for the most part, even though again sometimes it takes me a lot of attempts. Whenever I first got to this stage, whenever I first experienced the entire remake of Mario vs. Donkey Kong for the first time, and yeah, it did took me a couple of tries back then, but at least I know what to do right here, which is especially noticeable because obviously I've already experienced this a couple of times, not only for its regular run, but also with the time attack mode as well, which again, we'll get to the time attack mode until eventually later on. So yeah, because believe me though, it's about the fact that, well, again, we'll discuss more about it. So, alright, so it looks like we've only got 2 gold stars left, and then once you're able to complete every single levels in the game, fully 100% in fact, is that just like the forms of how it does in the original Game Boy Advance version, I believe we're able to actually get ourselves a nice glorious gold medal right next to your save file. So, I can assure you that's it's pretty much similar aspect as the originals though. Alright, so we're going back into Mystic Forest plus variation, just because, you know, with nighttime setting and everything. And this stage is a little bit tricky, I'm not gonna lie, if only because if you almost got sidetracked, obviously there might be a good chance that you might able to accidentally skip over that particular last blue present right here. So just to ensure you might able to do it like so, for this particular point right here. But yeah, that's as far as I'm aware for this point, guys. That's as far as I can try to talk about in terms of the forms of today's discussion. I mean, sure enough though, I'm having a lot of fun playing through Princess Peach Showtime so far. Although, mind you about the fact that, again, we're not going to go into any spoilers for the time being, just because, you know, that game is relatively new at this point. Especially noticeable because, obviously, no matter what though, that I've noticed about the fact that there's a lot of videos out there that did somehow spoil the final boss already, which we're probably not going to go into any more further details up to this point, especially noticeable because we don't want to spoil for ourselves, especially just like the forms of how it does it on, you know, other new games during that specific time, ranging from, you know, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and much, much more. Like, generally speaking of, I'm so sick of the forms of trying to able to know that a lot of people keep on posting the forms of some spoiler elements during the forms of brand new games for the time. Although except with the forms of some remasters or ports or remakes from certain other games I've already experienced before, just because I know exactly what to expect, even though about the fact that, well, you get the idea. Alright, so Expert level 15 is pretty much done. And now we're moving on to the true final level in this remake, and that appears to be, of course, level 16. So as a result, we're going back into Twilight City Plus. So, as a result, we have to rely on Bob-Bombs yet again. So potentially speaking though, about the fact that this one, or this particular stage rather, might not give me that much of a hard time. Which, unlike the original though, it is really tough. Whilst in the remake this time, thanks to the forms of every time when you get knocked back, obviously, no matter what though, the invincibility frames decides to kick in. So, at the very least though, it's actually a lot possible to able to actually like, well, complete the stage flawlessly. So, although still, we need to be careful about this though, especially noticeable we don't want to let the actual explosion get impact. And, also, we still need to able to try to avoid a lot of lasers though, because obviously that will count as a death as well. So, yeah, you pretty much already expect of what's to come. So, anyways though, And also, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day as well. What was your first impressions for able to experiencing Princess Peach Showtime for the Nintendo Switch? Do you enjoy it so far? Or if not, then obviously opinions is opinions related. So because of that though, yeah, as I said this countless amount of times already, everyone else do have their own different opinions. So because of that though, understandably so, just to ensure for the fact that with the different taste of theirs or anything else like that. So, and I'm pretty sure that pretty much settles in from here. Although we do need to grab this last present in the entire game, so we're gonna have to do this very carefully, so... Alright, nicely done. Now you can able to actually hop onto the Bob-omb if you want, but I'm actually gonna do this the trickiest way by making that specific jump with that tiny platform over there, so that way we can able to go through that particular door no problem, rather than just waiting for that Bob-omb to come near you. So, I suppose that makes this possible, which so much so, we've succeeded. And there we go folks, we are basically done every single stages in Mario vs. Donkey Kong Remake, and it's especially noticeable that we somehow achieved all 136 gold stars. Yeah, pretty top notch here and there. So, and I suppose no matter what though, before we end off the video right here, let me just rank up some more extra lives, so that way we can able to go back into 99 maximum lives. And as you can see, we've got ourselves a glorious gold medal. So as a result, everything else is done, right? Well, as it turns out, no matter what though, we are still not done with this game just yet, because as far as I'm aware, we have to deal with this one last thing before we're able to move on to the next part, and that is obviously the time attack mode, which as a result, we'll discuss more about it until tomorrow. So for now, let's go ahead and tackle for this bonus stage for the final time, even though it's kind of unfortunate about the fact that we never get a chance to see the variants based off from Merry Mini Land Plus. Well, that's just mainly because I didn't pay attention to the menu navigation. So because of that though, yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that we will miss that out. So, oh well, no big deal, we've back up to 99 lives. So, thanks to the phones of certain one-ups, did somehow showed up. And with that being said folks, is that we got the endings of this point right here. So join me tomorrow for more of Let's Play of Mario vs. Donkey Kong Remake, is that we're about to participating in achieving all these gold medals for the sake of the time attack stages. So we're about to get started with Mario Toy Company and probably some other worlds in the future. So I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later fellas.